I want to bring in my guest, though. I am joined with the man himself, Laith Marouf. Laith, how you doing today? My voice is a little screwed up. I had a miserable night. How you doing, man? You doing okay?
Doing good. Thank you very much for having me, Jamal.
Oh, man, always good to have you. Laith Marouf, he's an award-winning multimedia producer and media policy law consultant focused on issues of liberation and decolonization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples and building broadcasting capabilities for misrepresented and underrepresented communities around the world. Laith, where can people find you? It's Free Palestine TV, correct?
Yes, the website is freepalestine.video, and we're on most social media platforms. We're on X at TV Free Palestine, and we're doing field reporting from Palestine and Lebanon in English almost on a daily basis.
Oh, very cool, man. Very cool. I have to get to a story that has been bubbling up that I saw this morning, and I want to get your take on it. I am, I would tell you, very skeptical of this story. And I suspect Iran, based on their behavior, is very skeptical also. So it's been reported that Trump has cut ties with Netanyahu, that Trump felt disrespected. Of course, Walsh was an Israeli spy and had been working behind the scenes in order to get basically attack plans against Iran behind Trump's back. The reporting is that Trump didn't necessarily like that. And he felt that Israel is, let's say, taking him for granted and disrespecting him and making him look as if he's a junior partner as opposed to the president. Now, I will tell you, before Trump got into office, I said to myself, or I think I even said it on air, that Donald Trump is not going to accept the same position that Joe Biden accepted, where Joe Biden continues to look weak and everything else. By the same token, I still remember Joe Biden saying, oh my God, Israel better not go into Rafah. They go into Rafah. Oh my God, Israel better not do this. And he's like whining. And yet, here's more weapons. Here's more bombs. Here's more bullets. Here's more money. Here's more political support. So for me, that could fit within the same context of Trump. Oh, we're cutting ties. Here's more bombs. Here's more bullets. Here's more weapons, etc. Give me your take on this story, though. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you see this differently. What's your thoughts?
Well, it's hard to imagine that there's actually a fight between Netanyahu and Trump, given the fact that if we look at the imperial order on a global scale, there was always two wings, the liberal wing and the conservative wing of imperialists. And the liberal wing were, the Democrats with the King of Jordan and, the Egyptians and the whole Muslim Brotherhood, Arab quote-unquote spring, where I would call the Arab autumn, plot to have, democratic Islamists like the Christian Democrats in Germany that replaced the Nazis, right?
Right.
That's the one wing. And the other wing in the conservative imperial order includes like the Saudis, basically the Wahhabi death squads, the ultra-Zionist of Netanyahu, and the Trumps. And we saw a kind of bloodless civil war happen between these two wings over the last 10 years. And the coup of Netanyahu and the Saudis, the Wahhabis, basically against the Obama's project of the Arab Spring. And as we see right now, without the ultra-Zionists of Netanyahu and their ability to shield fascist white supremacy in its Christian and secular form by giving that shield of accusations of anti-Semitism, and the ability of the Jewish white supremacists, aka the Zionists, to publicly genocide and rape, as we see a second video of another Palestinian prisoner being raped in Israeli detention, and beat up students, as we saw 2 days ago in the Columbia University, choke them almost to death,
Yeah.
right? This is without the Zionists normalizing this and providing a shield for the Christian and secular white supremacists, the rise of Trump and his existence and the existence of all these neo-Nazi, neo-fascist white supremacists that are taking over all of Europe and the West wouldn't happen. So it's a joke. Trump and the Christian and secular white supremacists in the United States cannot exist without the shield of the Zionist, the approval stamp of the Zionists that's saying these are the saviors of Judaism and Christianity. Without the Zionists giving that approval stamp on Trump, he wouldn't exist.
Fair enough. And of course, he's been completely obsequious to Israel and their wants, even bastardizing the First Amendment, even deporting people out the country that's supposed to be into the country, getting rid of students. All of that stuff has been true. Even the legislation that they were going to put, the anti-boycott Israel legislation that they were trying to push through Congress, agreed. There is a few data points, though. One data point is this. This was something that took place where the U.S. effectively capitulated to the Houthis, and Israel apparently didn't know anything about it, with Huckabee coming out saying, look, if the U.S. wants to, we can do what we want. We don't need Israel's permission to do it. This is Trump responding to a reporter who's saying, hey, what if they continue to fire missiles at Israel? Are you, is this truce still in effect?
That the Houthis are backing down. We're seeing conflicting reports that they plan on continuing to attack Israel in support of Gaza. Does that change the equation?
No, I don't know about that, frankly, but I know one thing: they want nothing to do with us, and they've let that be known through all of their surrogates.
So effectively what Trump is saying is, look, if they need to attack Israel, fair enough, they just better not attack us, which, according to the reports, caught Israel off guard, where they were like, whoa, what the hell? You're supposed to continue to kill civilians in Yemen. Here's another data point. Donald Trump is apparently allowing, here it is. Donald Trump is apparently allowing Saudi Arabia to build nuclear power plants. Now, the very act of saying allow sounds funny to me because they're supposed to be a sovereign country, but whatever. But they've dropped the demand that Joe Biden had that they needed to normalize relations with Israel. And Trump says, okay, we don't need to do that. Build your power plant. Are these, and one last point, AIPAC doesn't believe that Donald Trump can get any deal through Congress without their support. And they have started agitating to members of Congress in order to effectively block any deal that Donald Trump may get with either Iran or, for that matter, Saudi Arabia. Now, again, I'm very skeptical of this, and I'll explain why in a moment. But does any of that change your mind? I mean, they even put out a video going after Trump, effectively saying, hey, Donald Trump needs to, for all intents and purposes, have a war with Iran and shouldn't accept any sort of deal short of the Libyan model.
To have a nuclear weapon.
President Trump has always been clear.
We must never allow a regime that chants death to America or death to Israel to obtain a nuclear weapon.
All right. Does any of this alter your point of view? Like, meaning, does any of these data points give you a perspective of, okay, well, maybe there's personal beef in the way that Donald Trump has this ego being the most important thing in the world to him, and he feels humiliated by what seemingly looks like Israel leading the U.S. as opposed to the U.S. leading Israel?
Well, look, the last American president to actually have a confrontation with the Zionists and do something, prioritize American foreign policy and interest over Zionist interest was George Bush Sr. And that was after the United States had occupied basically all the Gulf oil fields at the end of the first Gulf War, and was trying to jam a peace treaty between the Arabic states and the Zionist colony, and even offering to give Syria back the whole Golan Heights and all of that. And the Israelis went ahead and started bombarding Lebanon, and he withheld the shipments of weapons, George Bush Sr. And that led to him being the only president in modern times not to have 2 terms. Okay, so they forced him out of the presidency for attempting to coerce the Zionists into peace. Okay, so no, this is not going to happen. I think one thing that we need to understand about the battle with Yemen is that most probably we will hear over the next few months that actually the American aircraft carriers in the region lost more than 20 F-18s, not 1, not 2, not 3, that they have admitted, okay? And that the aircraft carriers that are nuclear powered were close to be blown up. Okay, this is why the Truman is rushing back now to dry dock to be fixed. Okay, so the United States pushed as far as it can to defend the Zionist colony from the Yemeni armed forces, and it almost led to the first and only ever sinking explosion of a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. So the United States had no choice but to withdraw here to save its face. I mean, look, if Yemen can sink these aircraft carriers, what is the chance of the United States against China or Russia, right? And I want to say one last thing. By the way, you are muted still, but one last thing here, and I know a little bit ranted there, but the United States announcing that it's going to stop bombing Yemen doesn't mean that that's true. What is going to happen is that the Zionist colony is going to pretend that it is bombing Yemen, and American jets will be still bombarding Yemen on behalf of the Zionist colony, and all of it being covered up as if it's the Zionist colony doing it. This is, I think, the extent of actually even this ceasefire between Yemen and the United States.
Okay, 2 things. Why do you think it's 26? And why do you think they nearly sunk an aircraft carrier? I don't even think Yemen or the Ansar Allah said as much. Like, where do you explain that for me?
Yeah, I said over 20. I didn't say 26, but I said
I'm
over
sorry,
20
over
at
20.
least. Yeah. And so this is because the actual, from sources that I have within the Yemeni armed forces and government, what they're telling us is that those jets were exploded on the deck of the aircraft carrier when it was hit. These jets were ready to take off, were hit on the deck. There was huge explosions on the deck of the aircraft carrier, and there was more missiles coming. This is what they talk when they talk to Americans about that maneuver that the aircraft carrier had to do, which led to even more of the jets that are on the deck to fall off. So in total, there's a whole squadron basically lost of F-18s. It's not a small number, and we'll get to know this as the secrets come out over the next few months.
Wow. In the other case, where Donald Trump is effectively saying, okay, we capitulate, we'll stop providing you don't target U.S. ships. I guess my thing is, I'm skeptical of this also. And part of the reason I'm skeptical of this is because I don't know if the U.S. has taken this position in order to create this kind of thing of, okay, if Israel hits Iran, well, we can say, well, we didn't have anything to do with it. this, the playbook of pathway to Persia, or which path to Persia, kind of plays this out, saying that the U.S. takes a step back, allows Israel to do it. And mind you, they can't do it without our help or assistance. But we still may say, oh my God, we had no idea that they were going to do that. I mean, and Iran seems to not believe it either. I mean, they have been escalating their rhetoric, and I don't think they're doing it for no reason. So, like this one, they said, we will open the gates of hell if Israel or the United States attack us. In another case, they're showing the technology. So they've been showing missile cities, they've been showing spy drones, and Iran wasn't doing this during negotiations. They started doing this after negotiations fell apart, which leads me to believe that they believe that an attack could be imminent, or at the very least is possible. How do you see that? I mean, do you see the reporting all of a sudden Trump cut ties with Netanyahu and Iran putting out this effectively war footage saying, don't test us at your own peril? Do you see these things related to one another? Iran doesn't seem to believe the cutting ties stuff.
You see, the reason that the U.S. was using these aircraft carriers to attack Yemen, it was because the Gulf states, where, especially Qatar, where the vast majority of American air power is stationed in the region, were scared that the Yemenis will retaliate if the jets from those fields were the ones bombarding them. And then you'll have Doha and Dubai and Abu Dhabi on flames, okay? All these glass towers just going down. It would have been a massacre for these fabricated states, right? So the US used these aircraft carriers and the Diego Garcia airfield in the Indian Ocean to conduct this bombardment campaign. Now, simultaneously, over the last 6 months, we saw the United States move a lot of the F-35s it has to Israel, okay? Not to Al Udeid in Qatar, but to Israel. And we can't account now for the vast majority of the F-35s that the US controls. We can't account to where they are. They're off radars and so on, but they are, from satellite images, they are now stationed in Israel. So what does this mean? This means that the United States will be conducting air bombardments of Yemen and of Iran if in eventual war, all camouflaged as if it's Israeli, because Israel doesn't have enough jets to conduct such campaigns. Even with the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and the mass bombardment in those 24 hours of Lebanon, it was clear that NATO jets were involved because the Israelis didn't have enough jets to conduct those thousands of raids simultaneously. So this is what's going to happen, and I think everybody knows the game. Nobody's stupid. Neither the Ansarullah or the Yemeni government and or Iran are stupid and are going to be fooled.
You agree with me on this, that this is a bit of theater. This is a kabuki show where the U.S. is trying to clean its hands off of what is about to happen in regards to Iran. And Iran is perfectly aware that this attack is imminent. I mean, and that's the other thing, right? You get Hegseth saying, we will attack you at the time and place of our choosing. You get Netanyahu apparently saying something very similar. We will attack you at the time and place of our choosing. You get Donald Trump associating everything that happens with the Houthis with Iran. And you even get this breaking off of negotiations with this kind of maximalist demands that they know Iran would never accept. So do you think this was always in the cards? That the entire point of all of this was, we're going to pretend like we're negotiating, and then we're going to break off negotiations. We're going to create a context to justify an attack, wash our hands of it, and pretend as if it's Iran, Israel that's doing the attacks, when in all earnest, we are helping them and even working with them to do those attacks.
Well, look, the experiment that the Americans did in Yemen right now proved to them that the price of attacking Iran is going to be huge.
Yeah.
It's going to lead to mass death of American soldiers in the region. It will lead to mass destruction in the Zionist colony. As much as in Iran, it will lead to the destruction of oil and gas exports from the region. It will lead to the disruption of international trade traffic from Asia to Africa to Europe to the Americas. And so if we look at it, what would analysts, strategists give as options in front of an American president that wants to maintain the hegemony of the United States, wants to shore up its status as the sole hegemon? They will say to him, if you don't do such a thing, you will only see a retreat of the empire from that point on, right? And the other thing is that the United States has, if we couple this with all what we saw with the protectionist tariff wars that Trump created, we can understand that the US actually has an interest in disrupting international trade. China is dependent on oil and gas coming from the Gulf.
Right.
China is dependent on sending its exports to Africa, Europe, and the Americas for its economy. Okay? The United States wants to cut this trade as a long-term strategy in order to slow down the rise of China and its pace, right? So while it may look like it doesn't make sense that the United States is willing to have all the oil fields that it controlled for the last 80 years in the Gulf to be up in flames, from a capitalist point of view, it does make sense when you know that the United States has its own supply of gas and oil, and we saw it how it wanted to force even Europe to be dependent on that gas and oil with cutting it from Russia and the attack on Nord Stream 2 and so forth, and wants to force Europe and or Africa to start buying again from its products, or Latin America, as we see. And that can only happen with disrupting the flow of products outside from China to the rest of the world. And this is the strategy, it seems like.
Interesting. What do you say to people who make what they would consider to be a rational argument, that they would say, well, look, this is a bag that the president doesn't necessarily want to hold because it's unpredictable. And if that attack takes place, for one, they don't know that they can pacify Iran. They don't know that the response that Iran is going to make is not necessarily going to, let's say, change the context of the world in the same way that the Ukraine thing did. And what I mean by that is the US and Europe went with this idea that, well, of course, we can economically destroy Russia. Of course, we can damage them to the point where Ukraine may be able to create a strategic defeat on the battlefield. Russia's just Nigeria with snow. They're a gas can masquerading as a country. And they got it wrong. And even in the trade war, they got it wrong. And it's very possible that going after Iran, they're going to get it wrong. And that on some level, the president has to be aware of that, at the very least has to be in his mind. And so going after them may not necessarily be something he wants to do because of the unpredictable consequences of it. What do you say to that argument? Because that is the argument that people often use when they try to rationalize and say, well, there's no way Trump is going to do that.
You know, before we started this interview, I was listening to you talk about the commemorations of Victory Day.
Yeah.
And you look at what you mentioned there, the difference in how the Nazi Germans dealt with other Germanic or Latin peoples in Europe versus how they treated the Slavic peoples,
Yeah.
right? And any rational decision making in terms of how they invaded the Soviet Union would have told you don't do that, right? You have the history of before you Napoleon, before them,
Yeah.
you got thousands of years of history of military conflict back and forth, east to west in Europe, and you know the results. It's not like you can change the course of geography or history, right? So the number one driver that pushed Hitler to go that way is because he's a supremacist. He saw, I mean, honestly, both world wars were about who amongst the quote unquote European white nations is the most supreme in the end. And we were lucky as human beings outside that category of whiteness that the Soviet Revolution happened in the middle of World War I, because the Russian elite and the Russian royal family were seeing themselves as white, first and foremost. They were intermarried into the Germans, into the Greeks, into whatever you want to, British royal family, all of that. All of them were intermarried.
Yeah, they're
And
like cousins. Yeah.
yeah, and if there was no Soviet Revolution, at the end of World War I or World War II, we would have all been culled in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. The Soviet Revolution created a schism and didn't allow the integration after the thousands of years of the Slavic people being the source of slavery in Europe. That's why their names, the word slave comes from Slavic. Were almost going to be integrated, and the Soviet Revolution stopped that integration. And so today you have Jewish white supremacists and Christian white supremacists that see Zionism and this, God mandate given to them to rule over humanity. And they're willing to genocide openly, as we see in Gaza. They have normalized it to a point where I think, and obviously there's now been millions of Arabic people specifically in Libya, in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, in Sudan over the last 15 years, before even this genocide in Gaza, that have been culled in front of humanity in the name of this supremacy.
Yeah.
So no, nothing is rational about this. It is going this way because our enemy is worse than the Nazis. Those who rule right now in the West are Zionists. The governments, the police, what's happening is we're even at the doors of having mass incarceration of Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim peoples in Europe and North America, and concentration camps that we haven't seen the likes of since World War II. This is where we at. And it's all going to be in the service of Zionism. So you can't rationalize the decisions if you don't understand that your enemy, his primary objective is to prove that they are the chosen people and we're all slaves to them.
Yeah, your point is ideological. It's not about because I had this exact same conversation, and my argument was similar. It was like, what's rational about going into curse? What's rational about, like these things seem to be more ideologically driven, not necessarily about what's in best interest. So, okay, so under this model, the entire point is to disrupt trade, to effectively to be able to go after China and to disrupt China's capability of exporting goods throughout the world, which is part of the reason that Trump put in the tariff war in order to raise up barriers with the US to, even though he may say it was about business, it was more so about blocking off these goods, knowing what they were going to do in Iran. Is that fair?
Yes. I mean, this is, I think when we look at it as a holistic way, this is where the pieces fit together. Otherwise, it seems all contradictory.
Right.
And, I don't believe Trump is just an insane man, or these decisions are just out of the whim. These are all calculated decisions. You have an empire with a state apparatus that is stable for hundreds of years and so forth. These are all plans that have been laid out with many multiple options, and each president comes in and chooses out of this variety that is put in front of them. And the objective currently right now is that if, the United States cannot allow the sovereignty of the Arabic people here in the region, and by extension, Muslim nations around us, like Iran, and even look at what's happening in Pakistan, and will not allow China to continue on this, ascension technologically so fast. They have to slow them down somehow, even if they don't want to go to war with them immediately.
What do you think Russia and China does in this situation? I mean, I would imagine that they have to, on some level, be aware of it. They have their war planners. They have their same people who have read the policy documents that the U.S. has been putting out. They realize that these people are sociopaths. And so, Iran is a close partnership with Russia at this point. And even if Russia doesn't get involved militarily, certainly they've been hardening Iran against a proposed or expected attack by the U.S. How do you think the other two powers respond? As you pointed out, China is, I don't want to say dependent, but definitely has a close relationship with Iran, and so does Russia.
Yeah, obviously, China is not worried about such a confrontation because of the fact that now Russia is even, dependent on selling its oil and gas to China because of the cuts of exports to Europe. So what I'm saying is that right now there's an integration of the industrial base and the energy base of Russia and China, and thus they are immune. But Chinese factories will have energy, but who are they going to export to if all the shipping lanes are under fire?
Yeah.
Right. So this is where the dilemma begins. And can the United States, if it disrupts international trade as it's trying to do, can the United States force huge swaths of land like in Africa and Europe and Latin America to buy from it? That's another thing. And as we see, the United States is causing a lot of fires around the world with what we saw with India and Pakistan, what we see on the borders of Nigeria with the Sahel Confederacy, what we're going to start seeing in Mexico pretty soon with the United States attempting to enforce its authority with its military over Mexican territory, as you know. So the United States is trying to create these fires that may scare everybody around them into submission. That's one of the strategies that the United States will play. Are they going to succeed? I'm not sure. And how crazy they are going to get every time they don't succeed, that's another thing. Are they going to raise the level of crazy? And we're very close to, I think there's already indications that we passed the nuclear threshold in terms of warfare, with the attack on Tartus in Syria, the attack on the port of Beirut, or the attack on Yemen a few years ago. So there is, I think, almost no limit to where this could end.
You think this is all done? This sounds like it's more out of desperation than anything else. Like where it's this, what is the word? Tunisian. I always get the word wrong, but the Elysian gap. I'm saying this wrong. Oftentimes, initially, I thought this was going to be about individual countries, but I don't think it's about individual countries anymore. I think it's about a conglomeration of East versus West, where you get this kind of block of China, Iran, Russia, etc., with, let's say, the white world, Europe, the United States, where they feel that their power is slipping away. They can see it with China. They can see it with Russia technologically and militarily. They can see it with China technologically. And as you point out, this notion of we need to stop that, and we need to stop it now, because in 20 years, that horse is way out the barn. We can't catch it. And so we need to find some way to inhibit that currently. Do you see this as more so out of desperation than anything else? How do you view this, that the hegemony is slipping away and they want to maintain this, regardless of what they say about multipolar world, that ultimately they want to maintain a hegemonic control of the globe? And this is one of the pathways of doing so.
Yeah, I mean, look, the ascension of European quote unquote civilization into control started 900 years ago, 1,000 years ago, with the Crusades. And we're kind of like in a full circle. In a millennia, we're back now, we have the Crusades, right? So
Yeah.
the Crusades were followed by the Inquisition in Iberia, and then the Crusades into Slavic lands, and then the invasion of the Americas, and then the invasion of Africa, and then the invasion of Australia. And it's almost a millennia of nonstop where the Western economies, the main source of wealth accumulation is not the Industrial Revolution or trade. The main source of wealth accumulation is the looting of colonized lands at zero cost. And the biggest waste of capital is the mass genocide that's, of human capital, right? This has been the main modem of economy in Western European civilizations, Anglo, Germanic, Latin cultures for a millennia. And they, if they cease to be able to colonize, loot, and genocide indigenous peoples, they cannot accumulate wealth. Okay, that looting and genocide is what made so much accumulation of wealth in the West that you had some guys being able to sit down and spend time inventing machinery. Okay, right? And currently, right now, we see that happening in the streets of the United States, right? Like the U.S. does it. On the one hand, the upper class, the 1%, are extremely wealthy, but they don't want to give any money to their masses, and they're offering. This is why the supremacy is important here. Okay, this is why Jewish, white supremacy, Christian white supremacy, Zionism in general is crucial. They're offering a way out to their masses that are hungry. They're saying, well, you know what? If you kill in the streets of New York, the cop is going to kill you, right? If you try to steal a car in Chicago, the cop is going to kill you. But you can carry a gun and go to the front lines in Palestine, in Africa, in Arabic countries, kill at will, rape and pillage, and you can have all the accumulated loot for you as a Jew from the Bronx that goes down to the front in Gaza, and or as an American soldier or mercenary that goes down on the streets of Yemen or in Burkina Faso, try to assassinate Traore. You see, this has been what the elite in Germanic, Anglo, Latin cultures have been offering their working class for a millennia. Your way out of poverty is go kill and loot and rape and pillage.
By the way, as an aside, I did a video on Ibrahim Traore, There was nothing explosive in the video, and YouTube demonetized that video. I'm sitting here like, what the hell? We weren't talking about wars. We weren't talking about any of that stuff. And just almost by very mention of his name, it created that response. From your point of view, what happens when they do this? Does this spark a war in the Middle East? I mean, if the U.S. gets embroiled into a war in the Middle East, but I guess from their point of view, we didn't have anything to do with it. That was all Israel. But there's no way the U.S. is going to leave Israel to its own devices. And certainly Israel knows that it's going to get hit. If it does that, Iran is a country of 80 million people with ungodly amount of missile and technology. Israel's going to get hit. What happens after that? Like, it seems suicidal.
Yeah, I mean, it's 100 years war. It's been going on. It didn't stop for us here since World War One, even a little bit more than 100 years.
Yeah.
So I don't think the West is going to withdraw anytime soon if they're not beaten. This is the thing. You know, the whole Western economies and media and international diplomacy has been dedicated to maintaining this Zionist colony for over 100 years, and they're going to continue until they have their skull crushed, literally. You know, you've got to break somebody's nose for them to stop. And this is why it's getting more and more violent, because the indigenous people are also fed up. You know, October 7th was a clear indication that the Palestinians have decided, you know what, we'd rather all die now, all at once, and take you all with us, okay? And we cease to exist, all of us, and the whole world into Armageddon, than die slowly and in you know, in the quiet corner, and nobody is listening and seeing us being killed. So this is where we at. The indigenous people here right now have reached a point of no return in terms of their resistance, and the West is also all in on this, as we see with the genocide. And the genocide has been expanded into Syria. It's now over 60,000 culled in Syria in the last few months. And we see the West is willing to expand the killing field from India to Congo. This is what the West is willing to do. So people all around the globe should not delude themselves that this could end anytime soon if there is no defeat of the West. And the populace in Canada, the United States, citizens of the West that don't want to be involved in this ongoing genocide, the worst since World War II, and don't want their countries to become fully fascist. They're already fascist, but fully fascist. They have a very small, short window to take action. We're not talking about demonstrating in the streets. Look at those students, how they got their, you know, throats crushed, you know, by the police in Columbia University. Take precautions and defend yourself, protect yourself from the what is coming.
Wow. Laith, man, thank you for this conversation. I always appreciate these conversations, and I appreciate your take. I like I said, I was very skeptical of this. I saw Joe Biden when he used to whine, "Oh, I don't want Israel to do this. Oh, Netanyahu is a son of a bitch," and all this other stuff. Here's more weapons. Here's more guns, etc. And for all of this talk, until I see Trump say, "We're stopping the weapons. We're stopping this. We're not giving you political support," then I'm very skeptical of all of this. Let's say the reporting that's coming out. Thank you for this, man. I really appreciate it. Laith Marouf, just to give your bio. Laith Marouf, he's an award-winning multimedia producer and media policy law consultant focused on issues of liberation and decolonization of indigenous nations to Arab peoples and building broadcasting capabilities for misrepresented and underrepresented communities around the world. And Laith, just please tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, freepalestine.video. You can find, watch all our latest reports from the field and episodes of our discussion shows, and donate to help us continue producing this content.
Very cool, man. Thank you for this. I appreciate it. You be safe, okay?
See you soon.
Have a good one.